My wedding day had always been something I dreamt of, a celebration of love shared with the people closest to me. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, surrounded by friends and family. But little did I know, the person who should have been celebrating with us would soon threaten to ruin everything. I had proposed to Sarah, and the joy was overwhelming. We spent countless hours meticulously planning every aspect of the event, from the food to the flowers, down to the perfect venue. The place we chose was a small, intimate garden by a serene lake, a location we both adored since our first visit. We agreed on it instantly. It was our dream venue, and we were sure nothing would make us change our minds. However, things began to take an unexpected turn. It was around this time that Sarah's mother, Rebecca, started to show signs of being overbearing. Though I had always known her to be a bit controlling, I never imagined she would go this far. At first, it was small suggestions about guest lists or the seating arrangement, nothing too outrageous. But soon, I began noticing something troubling. Rebecca had begun making decisions without consulting either of us. It became apparent that she had been in contact with the venue directly, trying to alter certain aspects of the wedding day without our knowledge. This wasn't just about making helpful suggestions. It was as if she had taken it upon herself to change the entire wedding. The moment I realized what was happening, I felt utterly betrayed. Rebecca had been in touch with the venue management, proposing new ideas for the setup and even suggesting alternative dates. When I confronted Sarah about it, she was just as shocked as I was. She had no idea what her mother was up to. We were both furious. It felt like a violation of everything we had worked for. The wedding day was supposed to be ours, a moment for us to decide every detail together. But Rebecca had made it clear she wanted to impose her own vision on it. After careful consideration, I decided I couldn't let this continue. I made the difficult decision to cancel Rebecca's invitation altogether. I felt terrible about it. But I knew it was necessary to ensure the day went according to our plans. When I informed Sarah of my decision, she supported me fully. While it was painful to cut ties with her mother over something like this, we both knew that protecting our special day was the most important thing. In the end, we enjoyed the wedding we had dreamed of, with no interference, and it was everything we had hoped for. At first, it seemed like harmless suggestions, little things here and there about what the wedding could be like. I thought it was just her getting carried away with the excitement. But soon, I realized those innocent comments were turning into something much more serious. A few weeks before the wedding, I had a call with the coordinator of the venue to finalize some last-minute preparations. That's when I found out something I could never have expected. Susan had contacted the venue in secret and changed the location without informing me. She'd made all the arrangements without ever saying a word to either Emily or me. I was stunned, furious, and honestly, my heart sank. The venue that was supposed to be the setting for our perfect day was no longer available to us. When I confronted Emily, she was just as surprised as I was. She couldn't believe her own mother would go that far. But the damage was done. The new venue was booked under her mom's name, and suddenly, it felt like everything we had been planning was slipping through our fingers. There was no way to undo what had already been done, and I was left with the feeling of helplessness. I never expected things to go this far, but now I was faced with a reality I never imagined. The wedding, which had once felt like our dream day, now seemed out of our control. What was meant to be a celebration of our love had turned into a battle for something that should have been simple and joyous. The trust that had been shattered was the hardest part to swallow. I couldn't believe what had happened. Everything seemed fine between us, and yet Susan had gone ahead and made decisions that directly impacted our plans. It felt like she was deliberately undermining everything we had worked for. What confused me even more was how Emily, stuck in the middle, wasn't sure what to do. She wanted to make everything right, but I knew this wasn't something I could easily overlook. It wasn't just about a change of venue. It was about trust, boundaries, and dignity. The moment I discovered the venue change, it hit me hard. Emily and I had been so certain about it, and we had been looking forward to it for months. Now, all of that seemed to be slipping through our fingers. I tried to rationalize it, thinking maybe it was just an honest mistake on Susan's part. But something deep inside told me it wasn't that simple. It felt as though this had been planned in secret, with ulterior motives at play. It wasn't just the venue change that hurt. It was the betrayal. Susan's actions made me question everything. How could someone we trusted do something like this? It wasn't about the event itself anymore, but about the respect we had lost. As much as I wanted to find a way to fix things, the damage was done. What Susan had done wasn't something we could easily move past. This was about more than just a misunderstanding. It was a breach of trust. I couldn't understand why Susan would act this way. She wasn't financially involved in the wedding, nor was she helping with the arrangements. Emily and I had taken care of everything ourselves, ensuring that the guest list stayed small and personal. Only those who truly mattered to us were invited. Yet, Susan seemed to think our wedding wasn't just about Emily and me, but rather about her ability to control and impose her own vision on the day. When I talked to Emily about it, her response was a mix of confusion and frustration. She was just as upset as I was, but didn't know how to confront her mother. She kept insisting that Susan didn't mean any harm, she was just trying to help. But I could tell Emily wasn't entirely convinced. There was a hesitation in her voice, an uncertainty that made me feel like she didn't want to admit the extent of her mom's interference. Susan's behavior had been escalating for months. She'd been picking out dresses without consulting us, discussing our wedding plans with others without asking, and now this latest move, changing things we had specifically agreed on. We spent hours on the phone with the venue coordinator, trying to undo the changes Susan had imposed, but the more we tried to fix things, the more complicated it became. It felt like we were being pushed aside, like our wedding was no longer just about us. Emily and I were left scrambling to assert some control over the day we had worked so hard to plan. All we wanted was to feel like this special moment was truly ours. But Susan's actions were starting to overshadow everything. The event venue Emily and I had been eyeing for months was unexpectedly unavailable, leaving us scrambling for alternatives. To complicate things further, Susan's habit of making decisions unilaterally only added to our stress. She had even reached out to Emily's aunt, informing her of the venue change without even consulting us first. It felt like Susan was running the show, turning our special day into something she had full control over, leaving us as mere observers. I tried to keep my composure and called Susan, hoping to calmly resolve the issue. However, as soon as I mentioned my concerns, she became defensive and dismissive. She minimized the situation, claiming that she was only trying to make things better for everyone involved. When I explained how this had hurt both me and Emily, she brushed it off with a laugh, telling me, "You're being overdramatic. It's just a venue. It's not that important." That's when I realized it wasn't about the venue at all. This wasn't merely a disagreement over a venue. It was about boundaries being crossed and how much control one person had taken over something so personal to us. Emily and I had envisioned this day in a certain way, and Susan's interference made it feel as though our feelings didn't matter. In that moment, I understood that trying to reason with her was futile, and I would have to stand up for our vision no matter what. It became clear that Susan was not concerned about the wedding itself, but rather her own involvement in it. She couldn't see how much her actions were affecting us. We were caught in a situation where our choices were being undermined, and it seemed like there was no room for compromise. Eventually, I had to accept that this was no longer just about planning a wedding. It had turned into a battle for our autonomy. It was all about control, and her inability to acknowledge our needs proved it. As the days passed, the friction between us intensified. Emily found herself caught between siding with me and attempting to maintain peace with her mom. Each time we discussed it, she seemed more withdrawn, uncertain about what action to take. She didn't want to disappoint her mom, but at the same time, she didn't want to lose me. I knew at that moment that something had to change. I couldn't just let it slide. But I also realized confronting Susan directly would not be easy. This wasn't just a minor disagreement. It was a struggle for control over the most significant day of our lives. And I was ready to fight for it. The more I reflected on it, the more my anger built up. Susan's behavior wasn't just domineering. It was utterly disrespectful. Emily and her mom had always shared a strong bond, and I respected that. But this was something else entirely. It felt as though Susan was doing everything she could to undercut me, turning our wedding into an event that she could claim as her own. Every conversation I had with Emily seemed to reinforce the distance between us. She didn't know what to do. Should she stand by her mom, as she always had? Or should she put her foot down and choose me? It was tearing her apart, and I could see it in her eyes. But the more I saw her struggle, the clearer it became to me. I couldn't just sit back and watch this happen. This wasn't about a difference in opinions anymore. This was about asserting our independence. I wasn't asking for her to choose between us, but I was asking for respect. I had to find a way to communicate this without escalating things further. Our wedding day had to be ours, fully, completely, and without interference from anyone. And I wasn't going to back down until that was the case. I couldn't shake off the nagging sense that everything was falling apart, and it only seemed to worsen as time passed. The problem was no longer just with the location. It felt like everything was falling apart. Every decision we made, Sarah had something to say about it, but it was never constructive. She'd offer comments like, "Do you really need to have such a large cake?" Or, "Why don't you think about inviting these people?" It wasn't the advice itself that bothered me. It was the constant undermining of our choices. Her need to control every aspect of the event had drained the joy out of what was meant to be our special occasion. But the breaking point came when she told Jack that I was being unreasonable and stubborn about the venue change. It hit me hard. To Sarah, I wasn't just a groom. I was an obstacle. The way she spoke about me behind my back made me feel utterly insignificant. Jack overheard this conversation, and that's when things between them began to unravel. The tension grew as Sarah kept pushing her opinions on us. She insisted on controlling the guest list, telling us who we should invite and who we shouldn't. Each time we disagreed, it felt like a personal attack. I started to dread any conversation with her, knowing it would end in frustration. Sarah seemed determined to turn everything into a battle of wills, trying to impose her version of how things should be done. It wasn't just her suggestions. It was the way she made us feel as if our own choices were invalid. As the days went by, the situation only became more unbearable. Emily, who had always been close to Sarah, began to notice the subtle manipulation. Emily didn't want to admit it, but she could feel the shift in Sarah's behavior. She started distancing herself from Sarah, not wanting to be part of the drama that seemed to follow her everywhere. It was becoming clear that the relationship between Sarah and Emily was being tested, and the trust that had once been unshakable began to crack. Things finally came to a head when Sarah demanded to know why we were making decisions without consulting her first. It was the final straw. Emily confronted her, explaining that we didn't need her constant interference. The air was thick with tension, and it was clear that things between them would never be the same again. What had started as a simple disagreement over details had turned into a full-blown conflict that threatened to unravel everything we had worked so hard to build. Emily was in a state of conflict. She couldn't deny that her mother's behavior was creating a rift between them. But every time she attempted to speak to Susan, it felt as though her concerns were dismissed with a simple flick of her hand. To Susan, I was not considered part of the family, merely an obstacle in her idealized wedding plans. That was the moment I understood that if I didn't take bold action, I might lose everything. Worse still, Emily would be stuck in the middle. The breaking point came when I discovered that Susan had secretly gone behind my back to change the wedding venue. She also manipulated the entire guest list, prioritizing her side of the family. My heart sank when Emily forwarded me the email with the updated details. Susan had taken control of everything, from the food to the music, without consulting me even once. My frustration was palpable, and I knew I could no longer remain silent. That evening, I made my way to Emily's house, my mind racing with anger and betrayal. I was determined to confront her about the decisions Susan had made, the ones that had sidelined me completely. The weight of everything I had been holding in was too much, and I knew it was time for us to have the conversation that should have happened long ago. As I stood at Emily's door, my hands trembled with both fear and determination. I couldn't allow this situation to continue, especially if it meant losing Emily or allowing Susan to manipulate everything. It was time to face the reality of what was happening and hope that Emily would understand. Emily, I've been patient, but this is too much now. This is supposed to be our wedding, not hers. I can't let this continue. I said it firmly, my frustration spilling out. Emily looked at me, conflicted, torn between her devotion to her mother and her commitment to me. She hesitated before responding. You're being too harsh. She's only trying to help. She has good intentions. I shook my head, my voice growing more determined. No, Emily, this isn't about help. She's trying to control everything. Our wedding should be about us, not her. I won't let her take over. The silence that followed was heavy. Emily's face reflected a mixture of hurt and confusion, her eyes searching for understanding. I could see it then, the flicker of realization. This wasn't just about the wedding plans anymore. It was about respect, boundaries, and making sure our day was truly ours. I could feel the weight of the decision bearing down on me. The choice was clear. I had to stand my ground or risk losing more than just a wedding. The tension in the room was almost palpable as I realized what was at stake. It wasn't easy to get to this point. Over time, I'd tried to be patient, to hold back my feelings, but each new thing her mother did chipped away at me. It started with little comments, suggestions that seemed harmless at first. But soon they escalated into full-blown decisions made without consulting me. Each time, I swallowed my frustration, believing it would all work out. But now, I saw the truth. This wasn't just a disagreement over a venue or flowers. It was a matter of control, of boundaries being crossed, of a future I wasn't willing to accept. As I looked at Emily, I knew I had to make my stand. It wasn't just for me. It was for us. If I let Susan continue like this, I feared it would destroy not only our wedding, but the foundation of trust and respect we were building. The weight of the situation was clear, and there was no turning back. I had to protect what was ours. I felt a deep unease in my chest, knowing that if I didn't do something now, I might lose everything I'd fought for. I couldn't let it go on any longer. "I'm calling off the event," I announced firmly. Sarah looked at me, eyes wide with disbelief. "I'm sorry, but I can't ignore this anymore. If she doesn't respect us, she doesn't get to be part of our lives." The room grew cold as Sarah absorbed what I had just said. I could see the struggle in her expression, but I had already made up my mind. Jenna had gone too far this time, and I couldn't let her continue to poison the atmosphere. The following days were filled with uncertainty. I was fully aware of the weight my decision carried, but I couldn't turn back now. Sarah and I barely spoke during that time. Doubts crept in. Had I done the right thing? Was severing ties with Jenna the best solution? I questioned myself constantly, wondering if there had been another way to fix the situation without burning bridges. Then, one evening, Sarah approached me. Her eyes were red, tears threatening to spill. "I get why you did it," she whispered, her voice heavy with emotion. "But my sister is devastated. You've pushed her away, and I don't know if there's a way to mend this now." It was a difficult decision, but I realized I had to stand firm in my beliefs. I couldn't allow anyone to jeopardize the bond I shared with Sarah, even if it meant creating tension with Linda. Sarah and I spent the following weeks working through everything, and though things weren't completely back to normal, I could sense that she understood why I made the choice I did. It hurt, but it was necessary. Linda, however, was incredibly upset. She avoided talking to me for a long time, and the divide between us became more pronounced. But ultimately, I knew I had to prioritize my relationship with Sarah and our future. The event still went ahead, albeit with a few changes, but it remained our special moment. I may never fully know if I made the right decision, but I took away one valuable lesson. Sometimes, standing up for what is right involves painful choices. And even though it cost me some relationships temporarily, I'm ready to pay that price to protect what truly matters. At first, it felt like the hardest thing I had ever done, but deep within, I understood that protecting my personal space was essential. I wasn't willing to let anyone come between me and Lily, no matter the consequences. In the following weeks, Lily and I took the time to talk through everything. Though things weren't perfect, I could tell she understood my reasoning. It was painful, but necessary. Meanwhile, Jessica was infuriated. We didn't speak for a while, and the distance between us grew clear. However, in the end, I knew it was crucial to focus on my future with Lily. The ceremony moved forward, albeit with some modifications, but it was still our day. Whether or not it was the right decision, I'll never know. But I learned a powerful lesson. Sometimes doing what's right requires making difficult decisions. And though it may cost relationships in the short run, I'm willing to bear that weight to preserve what truly matters. It was one of the hardest choices I've had to make. But I understood that setting boundaries was non-negotiable. I couldn't let anyone risk what I had with Megan, even if it meant causing hurt to Carla. Megan and I spent weeks hashing everything out, and while we weren't completely healed, I could feel that she acknowledged why I made that choice. The pain was real, but it was necessary. Carla, on the other hand, was outraged. She stopped talking to me for weeks, and the gap between us became undeniable. But in the end, I knew I had to make decisions that were best for Megan and our shared future. The event continued with some adjustments, but it was still our celebration. I may never fully know if I made the right choice, but I learned an important truth. Standing up for what is right often requires painful decisions, and even though it cost me relationships in the short term, I am willing to accept that in order to safeguard what truly matters. It was an incredibly hard thing to do, but deep down, I knew I needed to defend my space. I wasn't about to let anyone jeopardize what I had with Anna, even if it hurt Rachel in the process. Anna and I spent weeks having long conversations, and though we weren't completely back to where we had been, I could see she respected the decision I made. It hurt, but it was necessary. Rachel, on the other hand, was livid. She refused to speak to me for weeks, and the rift between us was clear. But in the end, I realized that protecting my relationship with Anna and our future was paramount. The wedding still went on, though some things were different. But it was still our special day. I'll never know if it was the right decision. But one thing is clear. Sometimes standing up for what is right involves painful choices. And even though it caused me relationships in the short term, I would make that sacrifice to protect what truly matters.